Without mutations, what? No evolution. I've kind of highlighted kind of key words here. It is the ultimate. In other words, there's really no other source for evolution to work. Source of all genetic variation. In other words, any variation, any evolution has to be tied to mutations. And it's the only new material. In other words, there's nothing else out there that can produce evolution. Mutations are absolutely crucial for evolution to work. Well, let's take a look at them. The facts, we as creationists say mutations do occur. So you don't start by refuting it by saying they don't occur. We recognize that mutations exist. They occur. Okay? What we do is we see that the data steers your thinking in a different direction than the evolutionist. For the evolutionist, it's the mechanism of evolution. And it's the essential and only mechanism. So if mutations don't work, then evolution doesn't work. Bottom line. You could stop there and not even come up with any other evidence if you can demonstrate that. And what I'd like to share is the results of 150 years of research. The creationist admits that they exist, but we observe that rather than them being a mechanism that moves in a positive direction, just as the Bible would predict as a result of the fall, they are destructive. They are degenerative. Okay? What does the evolutionist require? In order for evolution to work, you have to have mutations, but you have to have, it's the mechanism, you have to have them frequent. You also have to have many of them. In other words, they have to occur frequently, and you have to have lots of them. And thirdly, they have to be predominantly beneficial. That's key. This is what evolution requires. What are the results of 150 years of research? By the way, I found a transitional form. From plant life to animal life. There it is. Just wanted to wake you up. Okay, evolution requires that you have many, but 150 years of research, evolutionists have concluded that relatively speaking, they are rare. And if you want some statistics, these come from evolutionists. In fact, all of this information is the results of evolutionary research. They occur about one, the lower boundary is 1 per 10,000 to 1 million gene per generation, or 1 per 10 million DNA duplications, which is very infrequent. What that really says is that God really built into the creation boundaries that preserves the life that He has given. So the DNA molecule is a very stable molecule, in other words. And the research proves this out. So rather than there being frequent mutations, they're relatively rare. And evolutionists admit that. Secondly, you need them to be predictable, and you need for them to follow kind of a path. You have to have a stub in a fish. Then it's got to protrude further, and then you got to have a portion of a limb, and it's got to move in a positive direction. But they're unpredictable. The very opposite of what evolution requires. I found another transitional form. You never know what you're going to end up with a mutation. You can never predict it. In fact, if humans are evolving, you might end up with something like this. Yeah, in the process of evolution. An evolutionist, C.H. Maddington, says the following: "It remains true to say that we know of no way other than what? Not a predictable path, but random mutation by which new hereditary variation comes into being, nor any process other than natural selection by which hereditary constitution changes from one generation to the next." In other words, it's all random. It's the only way that it happens. It's unpredictable. This is their conclusion. Not only is it unpredictable, but in general, what do you need if you're an evolutionist? You need predominantly beneficial mutations. But instead, they're predominantly harmful. In fact, one of the world's leading researcher in mutations, H.J. Mueller, has the following thing to say. He says, "Most mutations are bad. In fact, good ones are so rare we can consider them all bad." He's an evolutionist. This is a result of his research. And he gives the stat well over 99% bad. But I like that last statement. They're so rare we can consider them all bad. They are a degeneration. That's what mutations are. They are not positive. They're not good. And even if you would have a good one, they are unpredictable. You might have a positive one in one direction, and then it degenerates in the next. Unpredictable, harmful. They impose what's called a genetic burden. It drags down the genetic quality of a species. What that means, over time, the viability of a species diminishes. There's more I could say, but there's more I can't say. So they're harmful. They impose a genetic burden. In the medical field, they're pathological. In other words, a lot of disease is traced to mutations. In fact, most diseases are traced to mutations. So medically, they're pathological. Another problem is when you have a significant mutation, oftentimes its own kind will not reproduce. It's considered like a freak, but that happens in the animal kingdom as well. They generally reject those that have mutations. And many of them are born sterile anyway and cannot reproduce. And rather than anything positive, all mutations are a loss of information. So we have 7 reasons why mutations don't work. And the bottom line is evolution is left with no mechanism. Lee Spetner says, "In all the reading I've done in the life sciences literature, I've never found a mutation that added information. It's always a loss. So it's always a degeneration." Now, Gary Parker is a Christian. He says to make evolution happen, or to even make evolution a scientific theory, evolutionists need some kind of genetic script writer to increase the quantity and quality of genetic information. And we have the very opposite. So evolution has no mechanism. Evolution is impossible. Verse 22. "And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the waters in the sea. Let the birds multiply in the earth." We have the blessing, which confirms the completion of the creation. In verse 23, we have the concluding statement, the chronology. "And there was evening, and there was morning, day 5. So we have completion. God completed his creation. Evolution supposedly is an ongoing process. The biblical text emphasizes the completedness in the blessing and then the completion of the day. So you have 7 reasons why The biblical text does not support the idea of evolution. So to try to mix the two, I think, is a huge mistake by the church. And unfortunately, the majority of Christians do that. So some conclusions: there's no mechanism for evolution. Instead, there's evidence of degeneration, just as the Bible predicts. And that should cause us to worship our Creator. He is worthy. Revelation 4:11.